Hello and welcome to the Skipping Fanny Show's Torture Cinema!
Why couldn't it have been the Zodana Armada?
The what? The Zoe Zaldana Armada? Does she
The
have
Zodan
an armada?
The Zodan Armada. Oh my god. Oh, you peasants.
That's... Wow, that's the meanest thing you've ever said, Paul.
Have you never seen The Last Starfighter?
No, Paul.
No.
I was born in 1983.
Sad panda. We'll be talking about The Last Starfighter in the course of this podcast.
What about the penultimate Starfighter?
I've never seen that one. I don't even think it exists, Natania.
It should.
It really should. They should do that as the prequel, because at least they'd have fun with the title. Like, what was his life like when there were two?
Yeah.
Pretty fun.
Was it like a Highlander situation, though?
Oh, there can be only one.
The both of you need to watch The Last Starfighter. So, that's just that. But, Shaun, you should introduce our special guest.
Well, we have to introduce ourselves first, because nobody knows who we are.
Oh, that's right.
I'm Shaun.
I'm Paul.
And today we're joined by a special guest, and that is none other than Natania Barron. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Natania Barron is a globe-trotting fantasy and science fiction author, fashion maven, and podcaster with a dozen novels, novellas, and collections to her name, including the Queen of Fate fantasy series and the Love and Netherford science fiction series via Solaris, plus much more. She also visits Switzerland and tortures Paul with photos from it.
So there's torture, and there's other...
I've never been to Switzerland, but Natania goes frequently.
I go frequently, yes. My day job headquarters is in Switzerland, so.
Oh, that's kind of.
So yes, I get tortured when Natania goes to Switzerland.
Yes, even on an ugly day, Switzerland is absolutely ridiculously gorgeous. So
it is true, at least from Natania's photos, anyway.
Wow.
Well, what are we discussing today, Shaun?
Today we are discussing on this show the 1999 video game adaptation Wing Commander, written by Chris Roberts and Kevin Droney, directed by Chris Roberts, and starring teen heartthrob Freddie Prinze Jr., Shaggy's alter ego Matthew Lillard, Saffron Burrows, Jürgen Prochnow, Jenny Holder, and many, many more. Daniel was not able to write the script for this, and so I get to say basically anything I want about Daniel, and we can pretend it's true. And so I will just note that Daniel, when he was a child, this was his favorite movie, and he wanted to be a pilgrim because he wanted weird space people powers. And I have that on authority from his journal. I'm not
sure that's true.
It's true. I've read it from his journals and his diaries.
But what is true that this film was selected, God help us, by our Patreon supporters based on a poll of bad films around the theme of bad times at Spaceship High. If you're not yet subscribed to our Patreon, please join us for as little as $1 a month. You could choose the crazy movies that Shaun ropes me in to do these episodes with.
Welcome.
You can also suggest future torture to us and forces upon us by voting in upcoming polls. We still have a special continuing challenge going on. When our Patreon gets to $150 a month, we'll do a special torture cinema show on 2019's Cats, God help us all, a film that gives more than one of us nightmares, even if we've never seen it. It surely gives me nightmares. Please tell folks about this show and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth is everything for fan-run podcasts, as Natania can attest, and we need your help to find new ears for our ridiculous show.
That's accurate. Okay, so the first thing we always do on these episodes is talk about what we're drinking. And as I just want to remind folks every time we do this, alcohol is not required, although you are free to do so if you are of legal age to drink alcohol. If you do drink alcohol, whether you're on the show or at home, please do so responsibly. No drinking and driving. We are not in any way encouraging inappropriate consumption of beverages of any form, really. You shouldn't even drink too much water, technically. So be responsible. It's really what it comes down to. So, with that in mind, Paul, what beverage are you drinking?
Dihydrogen monoxide, aka water.
Fancy.
Is it's at least bubbly?
No, I actually ran out of bubbly and haven't been to the store, so I don't have bubbly, which is a brand of bubbly's water that I like, but I'm out of bubbly, so I'm down to tap water. I'm going to the store tomorrow to get my supplies restocked.
All right. Next up then is you, Natania. What are you drinking?
Well, I showed the group before this, and those they can see this is a large dragon flagon mug that I got at the local Renaissance fair last weekend. And I am drinking Earl Grey Rooibos out of it because I cannot tolerate caffeine. Sadly, for many years, I could drink as much as I wanted with no problems at all. Now it gives me anxiety and insomnia. So I love the taste of Earl Grey, and I found this very lovely Earl Grey Rooibos from David's Tea, which I highly recommend. No sponsorship here, just love for this tea because it really does. Bergamot, big fan. Earl Grey, hot, obligatory, but yes.
Is that like a wait? Okay? I feel like a
bergamot is floral.
Tea.
It's definitely
bergamot.
floral.
It's citrus. So bergamot is
citrus?
actually
No?
but it does have a floral sort of accord to it. So it does for a lot of people. It reads that way.
It comes across as floral to me, not citrus. Okay.
But it's actually citrus. So it's from the bergamot, which is also the same as bitter orange. So
learned a fun fact.
Which, if you know me, I am a nerd about perfumery, and so bergamot and bitter orange are all parts of important smell accords that you would get in perfumes. So, yes, anyway. Orange blossom being one of my favorite florals, which is the blossom from the orange tree.
That smells nice.
We're learning fun facts without even getting to the movie, Shaun. Maybe we should just talk to Natania about perfumes and fashion.
I mean, we could have a heyday of just talking about perfumes, having someone on who does soaps, where they have all these
like
bizarre...
Megan.
Yeah, you could just have a heyday. Let's talk about the bizarre science of this stuff.
It is all so weird. It is all so weird. Yeah, and the whole history of perfume is fascinating because it's super, super, super old, and it starts from just people hey, this wood smells cool when you burn it. And then it became incense. And then it was what if we could find a way to smear this on ourselves and smell good? And so oils were invented. Then it really is the beginning of chemistry. So the beginning of chemistry is the beginning of perfumery, which is the coolest thing to me in the world because it's also dominated by women, which is also very cool. So anyway.
So people are just I want to smell good. And that's where we better understand the molecular makeup of this stuff.
We have to. You have to. Yeah, you literally because, this is I won't go on to too many little fun facts, but what's crazy is that not every flower you can not extract every scent from every flower. So a lot of flowers you can distill them down, you can steam them. With roses, it's really common. They've been doing it for thousands of years. All you need to do is steam it and distill that, and it smells like roses. Others, you have to use a method called enfleurage, which is actually pressing the flowers into sort of plates of oil, and then it slowly leaches them away. But then there's a whole bunch of flowers you can't do either of those things to. You can smell the flower, but you cannot recreate the smell from the flower. So you have to recreate the smell from other compounds and other flowers. Really popular one is violets and lily of the valley are good examples of, and heliotrope. You just can't actually get it from those flowers. You have to make it up. So you're creating chemistry to mimic the smell of nature, which is so cool.
Wow.
That is pretty cool and terrifying.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is pretty wild, but yeah, it really is the root of so much chemistry and alcohol as well, because alcohol distillation is a big part of that. So we kind of learned how to do all these things in concert. And there are cuneiform tablets that go way, way back that actually have the recipes for what the priestesses would make for perfumes. So
interesting. I feel like you would love the channel Tasting History.
Probably, yeah.
It's probably my favorite cooking channel. It's just a guy started it during COVID because he was a Disney performer and he couldn't do anything. So he just started doing these I'm going to research these ancient recipes and see if I can attempt to recreate them with the best approximations we can.
Yep.
And then try them and see what it's like. And so like he did like Spartan was like blood gruel or whatever.
I know what
it
you're
is.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yep. I love that.
It's fantastic. He's
Yep.
great.
Yep.
He like elicits all these experts to like talk about things. And the wild thing was learning all of these different like spices and things that we use that like actually don't exist. The species are extinct. So we
Yep.
we have to like, what? Like, how'd you let it die, you jerks? Why do you keep it going?
And how fascinating the flavor profiles were of food that we just don't have anymore. Like we've become pretty boring, like, but people put like that. The reason that holiday cookies and things have so many spices in it, because it was the time of year where you were going to just like throw the kitchen sink at it. But I love old world cookies, and I make them for people at Christmas. People still prefer chocolate chip cookies, but for me, having something like Pfeffernuss, which has pepper in it, and it has ginger, and it has all of these really complex things in it, so much better.
Oh yes, my mother growing up would make us cutout cookies. There weren't sugar cookies like you'd think. They were the dough was flavored with anise.
Yes.
Which everybody, when I brought the cookies to school, everybody thought that was weird. I just thought it was the most normal thing on the planet.
It's a very
that's the way my mother made it.
Yep, and a lot of Italians, anise is the flavor of. I can deal with anise in small quantities, not in large quantities. But
you and Yuzo probably don't get along.
It's okay. There's people who licorice is that way too. Yeah. Like,
Oh,
well, Paul was there when we went to Helsinki, right? The salmiakki. That it's like
yes, salted, I was there.
It's the devil to me. Like
yes, and an Australian feeding me licorice down under when I was on Duff. Oh God, Jerry Huntsman. Yeah, Jerry Huntsman feeding me licorice and telling me I should eat it. It's like, what are you doing to me, Jerry?
I get grumpy that it's hard to find good black licorice in the United States.
Well, that's because there's no such thing as good black licorice. That's
in the United States, Shaun, no.
Okay, we're gonna move on because I feel
let's move on. Let's move on to the actual film portion of this program.
I haven't told you what I'm drinking yet.
Yeah.
That's right. We missed that.
As long as it's not black licorice juice, we're fine. Otherwise, I'm going to have to leave. So
no, I believe I'm out of anything licorice related at this point that isn't tea. Although I do have licorice root in but I use that for medical reasons. Okay, so in my Portalin Project Speculative Literature Foundation mug, it is of course apple season, and so I bought legit apple cider. Because they're all over the place, and I made myself, I guess what you'd call a hot toddy. It's got a little rum. I put some mandarin peels in and some spices and a little Cointreau and some lemon juice and boiled it and incorporated, and that's what's in here.
I love that we have increased the level of complexity from literal flat water to water that's been boiled with someone's preconceived tea to your elevated cocktail with mandarin slices. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. You know what's really fun though about the apple cider I bought is like I went to look at the ingredients list thinking, oh gosh, it's going to be full of a bunch of stuff, right? And all it is like apples and then some potassium like sorbate or something, which I assume just helps keep it around for a little longer. And I was like, I feel really good about drinking this now because it's just apples.
Just apples.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what we're drinking.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Apples. It is apple season.
It is apple season. Yep. Okay, so we need to get to a summary of this movie, which I realized we did not sort before we got on here. And so unless anybody feels inclined, I can do it. Unless, Natania, you want to do it? No, absolutely not. And Paul, no. I'll just do it really quick.
Because Paul will go way too detailed.
Well, potentially, we have had conversations about this, Paul. How dare you, sir? So the basic story of Wing Commander, the movie, is imagine Das Boot and like the movie that would come later called Pearl Harbor. And they mash them together. And that's essentially the movie you get. There is, of course, this background. There's this Terran Confederation, and they've gone out into the stars. They've met these cat-like Kilrathi who like are really not very nice, and now there's this big war going on, and at the beginning of the story, this station called Pegasus Station has been attacked by the Kilrathi rather brutally, And in the attack, they managed to acquire essentially like the super futuristic version of the Enigma machine, which is like an AI that I guess is going to give away their tactical advantages. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't seem to really matter because it's really technically about Freddie Prinze Jr. and Matthew Lillard not admitting their feelings for each other, but still. But from there, it goes to this story about these two pilots who are on their way to their new post. They get sort of roped into trying to like track where this has gone. And they're trying to basically delay the Kilrathi before they can open this jump gate that's going to go right to Earth, because they can basically reverse engineer the Enigma and figure out how to get to Earth. And that's essentially the story. There is some stuff here about like their girls and like Matthew Lillard Max on one for a while, and then
As you do.
There's some random stuff in here about the fact that Freddie Prinze Jr.'s character is a pilgrim, which is almost entirely not explained through most of the story. I'm sure we'll come back to. There's, some pretty traditional, like, oh, you got like hot jock pilot type shenanigans and people dying, and that's really sad. It's basically like discount modern Battlestar Galactica with a side of Dust Boot, Pearl Harbor, and I guess U-571. It's basically this.
That basically sums that up.
Yeah.
More succinctly than I would.
It's not a complicated movie, like realistically.
No, but I probably would overdo the detail a bit.
I mean, I don't make the Dust Boot reference idly because
no, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. My dislike. We're gonna get to that in my dislikes too.
Yeah.
Just you wait.
I don't know that I missed anything terribly. I mean, I'm sure like character names may or may not be. I don't know. That matter.
I think at this point we can just go with the actors.
Yeah.
Because you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I mean, yeah, like it's Freddie Prinze Jr. Like, I mean, he was hot at this point. He was the hot commodity. That's all you need to know, really.
I mean, it strikes me so I graduated in 99 from high school. And for me, it makes so much sense that this film came out then. It feels such a product of its time.
Yes.
Partially because we're at that weird uncanny valley moment in film special effects, right? Where we're kind of going from the practical to the CG, and there's just a weird balance. So there's just a lot of moments that are just like, I'm not sure what's happening. We're trying to lean on storytelling, trying to sort of distract. It kind of very much reminds me of like in Harry Potter in the first movie where they're doing they're on the brooms and people all look like they're made of like spaghetti. Like there's no like, but
no
like
heft to them, yeah.
The aesthetics, which of course is what I paid attention to more than anything, is so late 90s, early aughts, like or early like Y2K, right? That's what my daughter calls it, right? The Y2K style. Everything from the eyebrows, Saffron Burrows eyebrows, which are massively plucked to the point of, that's what happened. That's what we all did. I have lustrous eyebrows. I would get them waxed, so I could feel the pain. But there's just also something about like the necklines of the outfits.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, there's like the casual, like the ones that look like the Star Trek kind of onesie situation almost, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to just sort of make it their own thing, but kind of not. And then of course Matthew Lillard's hair, like,
oh my God.
Right. I mean, it is distracting. But it is
I had
what it
questions. But like, is that legal in this man's space navy?
No, well, yeah, okay. No, yes.
He looked like one of the Backstreet Boys, right? Like that's kind of they both looked. I mean, frankly, they both looked like they were about to dance any moment.
They looked way too pretty for the military. Yeah,
he's what's his name from NSYNC?
Yeah, Justin Timberlake.
Yes, Justin Timberlake.
Lance Bass.
Yeah. Oh my lord! But you're completely right. They're like weirdly boy band pretty in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Which on the one hand, like, oh, I kind of get why they were like teen heartthrobs, because that is very much the 90s. But on the other hand,
Yeah.
it's sort of like also, but like these are grizzled. Well, at least some of them are in the story are supposed to be grizzled like war veterans. Like the new people maybe aren't necessarily there, but
the older characters are a little better, but our young pilots are a mess. It's like, are you going to go to a dance competition or are you going to shoot Kilrathi? I don't know which.
Well, and that's the thing too that made me think about that is that I was kind of reminded of do you remember Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson did that video on this sort of spaceship thing?
Yeah.
Like the black and white vibe. It felt kind of like that too. Like it really felt like you could take some of the frames from it and just add some music and it would be on Total Replay Live? What was it?
Oh, I know what you mean.
The one with Carson Daly, right? Was it Total Request Live, right? Because yeah. Again, dating ourselves. But I think that that's part of it too. It was almost like, did they use the same movie studio? Like, were they just kind of, a lot of this aesthetically felt like it was recycled, slightly reinterpreted, but then also just like wanting to be trendy in the moment. Like one of the super cool things about Star Wars, which is kind of not fair to compare it to, right? Is that Star Wars, aside from like Mark Hamill's hair in the third film, doesn't feel like it was made in the 70s and 80s, right? They're somehow able to sort of like create an aesthetic for the film that transcends that. And so when they did, prequels and sequels, no judgment about what those are like, though, there is a very clear Star Wars aesthetic that doesn't feel dated, right?
Yeah.
This failed miserably at that from the
Oh,
in every
we're gonna have
possible
thoughts
way.
because while it's not strictly only aesthetic, my dislike will come to later will bounce off this really hard. Yeah. Well, I guess with that in mind, since we're rambling about the movie, we should get to our likes and dislikes.
We should.
And so we're gonna turn it over to Natania as our guest. You get to pick a like. So what would you like to talk about that you liked in this movie?
I mean, I like the sort of ambition, right? I mean, I like when people try to make science fiction movies. I like when they tried to take something from a video game, and have really interesting aliens, or at least on paper, sounds like that was what it was kind of pitched at. When I was reading up about it afterwards, it sounds like the movie that they signed on for is not what actually was made. So you do kind of feel bad for Freddie Prinze Jr. and for Matthew Lillard and everyone involved, because it does sound like the script was completely different once they actually started making the film. But I always think it's a good thing. And I do like, because not to completely contradict myself entirely, but there are genre films from the 80s and 90s that still lean into the aesthetic, like Labyrinth, right? There is no doubt when this movie happens, right? The costumes are like the 1980s on acid, the ball gown that Sarah wears, the puffy sleeves, everything that is David Bowie, but somehow that makes it work. I feel like here, you've got to give them credit for the ambition and for getting what they felt like were the title actors to get this going. I just feel that beyond that, there's just so, like you said, there are really important things about science fiction that you need to establish straight ahead, especially things like, what is a pilgrim? What do they do? Why is it important? If we're talking about the destruction of humanity, what is really at stake? And part of it, I think, is that my husband will disagree with me because he loves Matthew Lillard, but I just feel like he can't really carry stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe it's miscasting. Maybe it feels like a weird, like, shadow universe version of Scooby-Doo at this point, right? you're like, this is what could have been, right? So that's, I mean, it is demonstrably not a good film. That's why we're talking about it. But I do love that you can tell that there was someone there trying to commit to something. They were trying to build something different, and they were trying to build something that they thought people would love. And the best case scenario, and it's something like this, is that people start cosplaying them and people start having conventions about them, and it becomes, but then we have movies like Battlefield Earth, right? So,
oh God,
unfortunately, it doesn't always land. But yes, I love the ambition. I love, they did a good job with the costumes are definitely of the era. appreciate that they did cool things with the costumes and with alien costumes, and it's usually the heads that's the biggest problem. It's like the haircuts, the hair colors, the makeup, and all these things.
Yeah.
Just sort of not quite as much. But that's my thought for my like.
I'm glad you brought up that. So like Freddie Prinze Jr. apparently that there was another script for this, and he and Matthew Lillard, I guess, signed on for what that original script was, which Freddie Prinze has said he loved. And then he showed up and they handed him another script, and that script was not good. And so I don't know what happened between whatever script he saw that he auditioned for and then signed up for and the version they eventually got. But to go from I love it to it's garbage, that suggests pretty substantial changes.
It does.
So
and this I think it sounds like it was also production was rushed a bit to get it out because of Phantom Menace coming out. Yeah. Because that was such a cultural point. And I mean, I barely remember this movie at all. I mean, we all skipped school to go see Phantom Menace, which is, another sad story.
Too.
In addition to that. But I think part of that may have been, just my guess is insiders thinking that they could make it better, and they in fact made it much, much worse. But sometimes it's like the highest paid person's opinion, right? It could have been an executive producer. Very often somebody who's got the financial rings, and no one's there. Everyone wants to get paid. I mean, making movies is a business, and you're like, well, is it worth to get fired from this project if I push back, or should we just try to make the movie? But when you hear the head actor saying, I can't even watch this movie, and he's been in some stinkers, that's pretty indicative that something was amiss. And I think you can feel that. I think you can feel it. There's something about the performances that are, like I said, it feels more like a music video.
Yeah,
it does.
You're right. It does kind of feel at moments like this is like a scene from a music video of that era.
Yeah.
And I almost kind of wish like it had just broken up into like an NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. Because like there's the sci-fi like Backstreet Boys, was that like Backstreet's Back or whatever, the one in space where they're like,
yeah, exactly.
And that feels like this movie.
It really does. It really, really does. Like down to the coordinated like outfits and stuff.
Yeah, like if they just made this movie and went, it's not Wing Commander, it's the Backstreet Boys sci-fi film, and it's just them. You'd be like, it's not good per se, but it's kind of fun. Because it's ridiculous. And like with musical numbers, like that would be ambitious. They should just do that.
Yep.
Yeah. Past world, pay me now. Great. Okay, so Paul, what about your like?
Okay. As opposed to our way too pretty for life, major younger characters, Freddie Prinze Jr., Saffron Burrows, Matthew Lillard, I liked the trio of I guess he won't see much from it, but I guess quartet of the older actors and characters. Oh, we have Ducheki Cario as Commodore Taggart, although we don't know he's a Commodore. We think he's just this guy that's running this freighter at the beginning. We have David Suchet as Captain Sansky. We have Georgian Prochnow as Commander Gerald, and we have David Warner as Admiral Talwin. And they seem to have decided they understood the assignment. They play it straight. They look good. They don't look like they're stepping out of an NSYNC video, and they're taking it as a serious science fiction World War II movie, and they sell it, and they even sell it to the plot. Like they seem to understand what the plot is, even though the plot, although I understand it, is really kind of muddled by the bad script. I understand what's going on, but they seem to know where they are and what universe they're in. Yeah. Unlike like a pretty boy and girl pilots, and it's like you were mentioning before, things like Das Boot News 571, they feel like they're in that kind of movie. Yeah. I mean, this is almost like a tale of two movies. We have the serious World War II in space movie, and then we have pilots in NSYNC movie, and they're in the movie part I like, which is the serious World War II movie of this chess battle against the Kilrathi, and they make it all work. I would have liked the movie. I could have thrown our young pilots off the air. Let's just focus on them, and that would have made me happy.
What you're saying, Paul, does make me think that in just a handful of years after this film comes out, we get a film that does what this, or not a film, a TV show that actually does some of those different types of tones, but does it in a way where they don't interfere with one another, and that'd be the Battlestar Galactica show.
Star Galactica, exactly. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
Very serious performance of Edward James Olmos,
Right.
who it's very stoic and straight, with characters that they're not supposed to even be there. Like like Starbuck she's a great pilot, but she's also kind of presented to us as a screw up because she does like authority, and so being put in a situation where screwing up and being, like this person who bucks authority, that doesn't work anymore. Like there's a line at which you can't cross because the whole human species is going to die. And I think it handles that so well by showing actually why Starbuck is like that is there's a lot of trauma that's there that makes her act the way that she does. And this film can't ever get there because it doesn't commit to any of the narrative points that would let that happen.
I mean, Matthew Lillard's love interest dies because he and her are stupid, and he's like
bone interest. Like which one is
bone interest? Okay, interest. Oh, bone interest. And he's glum for 5 minutes and then goes back to work. It's like, God, that is a terrible bit of character writing. Terrible.
Yeah. We're not even going to talk about like the presence of women in this. That's just
you wait till I get to my dislike.
Okay, well, I
unless you step on me, in which case I have other dislikes. Don't worry.
Totally. No, and I want you to go with that too. I think it's important because I don't want to always, I don't want to be the token woman who's like, I went in knowing. I mean, that's part of having grown up in that period. But back to the Battlestar Galactica point. That's one of the reasons, though, that I think that series is so good because it does what this doesn't do either with both internal and external villainy, right? Villainy more than just like, oh, there's bad aliens and they want to eradicate human beings. It's also this like the real conflict inside happening per person, right? Some of my favorite stuff is, like James Callis's character, right? What is his name in the show?
Baltar.
Can I think of it? Baltar. Yeah. Of course, like I am such a total softie for the like foppish British like tenderfoot character, so like I was immediately sold. But his character arc is so fascinating, and like you have redemption and you have backsliding and you have like again trauma and all of this stuff. And I think that's like one of my larger gripes with science fiction as a whole is not taking these really important things because we have vast space. Yet we don't really have the space. It's almost always a bottle episode. There's such force proximity, and you can't you can throw Baltar in the brig, or you can throw him out the airlock, but you're kind of stuck with him, and you're probably not going to kill him because he's too valuable and he knows too much, right? And those levels of discomfort to me are what make the science fiction that I love so compelling. And I think that particular series between the performances and the attention to narrative detail, fat suits aside, we can't be perfect, okay? We can't be perfect, but it really does take into consideration what I think makes the best science fiction, which is interpersonal conflict. And when it is presented in this sort of shiny Y2K wrapping, where it's just it's like cotton candy, right? Like it's pretty, but the minute you put it in your mouth, it's evaporated and it's gone. You feel like that little the meme, the video of the raccoon trying to eat and wash cotton candy. They love to wash their food first, and like there's a pic. He's like got it, and he puts it in the water, and then he's just like, what? It's gone. That's kind of how this is. Like they got you in at the beginning, and then you're there, and you're like, there's nothing here. There's nothing. So
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Every time this film wants to have something, it feels like it's just there. Like it's a note, like a marginal note that has been added. Yeah. It does not feel like it's integrated. And I think that's like, I remember when we were watching this live, there are these moments with like, we're like, oh, such and such is a pilgrim, right? Like he's a pilgrim. He's a pilgrim. He's got a pilgrim. Look how he's behaving. He can like navigate magically with nothing. He doesn't listen to the computers or nothing. He's a pilgrim.
Space
right?
magic.
How does nobody else know that he's a pilgrim? How's no one figured this out? And then, of course, he reveals it. And what's the reason for why he can't just navigate the ship into go tell people at Earth that they're coming? He drank too much coffee that day. I don't know. Like, there's no logic to it. It's just the character can have his heroic moment and prove that he can be trustworthy after all.
Mm-hmm.
I find just contrived. It just feels.
It is 100%.
Everything feels so obvious. Like, the hero's got to do it because the hero's got to do it because the hero's got to do it, and that's the only reason behind it, and not because that's the only logical choice that the story can make. Like maybe he dies. The like older pilgrim guy is dead, or he's dying and he can't do it. At least then it's like, okay, well then our pilgrim young person. But then like, where did the force powers come from that he obviously has? Like, well, he doesn't even know he has force power. He just found out they exist. Maybe ?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, are pilgrims like evolutionary mutants in this? I mean, that's the rumor we're told, but like we're shown what makes them.
And then they apparently fought a war and stuff, but we don't know anything. It frustrates me to death.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, and we talk about this all the time in narrative, right? Like readers and viewers feel betrayed, which is what we feel when we want to be in on certain secrets. And especially genre enjoyers, right? We want to be smart enough to figure out something going on, and when there's no payoff, it feels like a waste of your time. And you're like, wow, I'm trying to suspend my disbelief. I'm trying to follow you on this grand adventure, and the most basic thing, which is the chosen one trope, right? That's essentially what this pilgrim nonsense is. That he's King Arthur. He can pull the sword from the stone. He's Luke Skywalker. He can do a force pull or whatever. It doesn't really, all it does is serve to sort of add, like you said, I guess some sort of, they're trying to kind of pull that together, but it really doesn't. And I think part of that is, though it is kind of a busy film, it's almost like, again, there's like no substance, there's no real soul underneath it. And showrunners, movie runners, maybe if the script was completely screwed up, I'm imagining that so much other stuff just fell through the cracks. Like, how can you perform something if you're just like, this is all garbage and I just need to get this so I can be done and fulfill my contract? And I think that felt like, you always wonder, like, which day on set was this? Like, some of the scenes you're like, oh man, this feels like this was toward the end of filming and they're just like, get me the F off of this ship.
Yeah. There are definitely days where you could tell, like, they've hit it. They hit their limit for the day.
They hit
like,
their wall, yes.
For another cut. I can't do another one. We should note that for everyone listening who keeps hearing us say pilgrim, like
yes,
the whole story, like we get a note at the beginning. There was like a pilgrim war. We don't learn really anything about it except it's over ? Right? And then later we find out Freddie Prinze's character Blair is a pilgrim, half pilgrim. And he keeps being referred to by the half in much more negative terms throughout, because he carries like a pilgrim cross. And so like there's some religious aspects to it. But we don't really have any context for why people don't like pilgrims. And the information we're given, it's unclear if we're supposed to take it seriously. Because like the implication is pilgrims are like humans that went out of space and then they like evolved and started to think of themselves not quite as human. And then for reasons I don't understand, there was a war with the rest of humanity.
Just because, Shaun.
I guess because they...
Just because. But you don't trust any pilgrims, including... So when Freddie Prinze Jr. turns out to be half pilgrim, you can't trust him. And so we have to have this redemption arc where we can learn to trust this pilgrim.
Yeah. Like, but there's no context. They're just told.
But there's no context to make us feel that. I mean, yes, he has this weird pilgrim cross thing, and the other character that reveals that he's pilgrim too. It's like, but there's just not enough heft to that. I mean,
No.
if this was a book, I'd be writing a very angry book review about the world
Paul,
building.
there is a novelization. If you want, you can
No!
track that down.
I do not hate review books, Natania. I do not hate review books. Life is
I
too
don't
short.
either. I don't either. But I'm just saying, if you ever have a moment where you're like, could it be worse? Somehow, I feel like the answer.
Yeah,
is yes.
that's dumping the salt on the wound.
Okay.
But Shaun, we have to talk about your like.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm supposed to like something about this movie.
You're supposed to like something about this film. I know this has been a very hate watch episode, listeners. I'm sorry, watchers. Sorry.
We were traumatized by Y2K fashion, so this is part of it. That's all.
That's fair. Yeah.
The aesthetic, as my daughter
the aesthetic,
says.
Yeah. If there's something I like about this movie, as far as video game adaptations go, this is not anywhere near the worst of them from this era. The best is obviously the Mortal Kombat adaptation. I say obviously, that's my opinion, but still. But like, even though there are huge problems with this film, and it has almost really nothing to do with the games, it kind of does with adaptations what I prefer adaptations to do, which is not try to be too faithful, but also try to capture some of the feeling of the original work. And one of the things that I think that this does very well is, even though I'm going to come back to it later with my dislike, the fact is, like, it captures this, like, air command pilot arrogance, like, excitement, I think, kind of well. The CG is maybe not perfect, but it very much captures, like, the excitement of, like, being in these battle situations, and I find it rather believable. Mostly even, like, the relationships that are there. There are some very good character notes here, like with Burroughs' character, who has clearly been traumatized by losing her wingman, who was obviously more important to her than just a wingman, and has this very rigid idea of, like, when you die, you just didn't ever exist. That's being met up against these newer, younger, more frankly arrogant pilots who don't view it that way. I think that element is captured really, really well, even if it's maybe not entirely accurate to how it would really go in society. It felt very like Top Gun.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that. And you can, I think that they probably pitched it a little bit like that, right? Let's make this video game, but Top Gun in space, right?
Yeah.
And I think it has it going, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's important that we retell things all the time. I'm a person that, like, I really think overall I'd have no problem with sequels and retellings. It's just a human condition.
Sister says the woman has excellent King Arthur books featuring characters very rarely seen in other King Arthur tellings.
But there's always something else to tell, and I think it's fan fiction, right? We have King Arthur is one of the first fan fictions outside of maybe the Bible, but I don't want to get that to be. But still, like, I mean, there is so much that is. I love being able to sort of see the pieces, and that's what I mean by that ambition. Because, like, to your point, you can see what they were trying to do.
Yeah,
and I think it could have been good. It just wasn't.
Yeah, I think if you just commit to that, you commit to this. Maybe I'll come back to it later with my dislike, I'm sure, but really commit to, like, this is the kind of story we're telling, a war story, and, like, we don't need all this other pilgrim mumbo jumbos. Like, just dump it. Tell a really good war story about really interesting characters in this situation, and even some of the things that I'm going to take issue with later, I think I just ignore because they become essential to the story that you want to tell, which is a very particular kind of war story. I just think this wants to be other things too. And when it's just a war story, I think it's actually really quite good. Even when Matthew Lillard's hamming it up and being a little silly, I actually found him okay in this. I thought his performance was actually more dramatic than I've seen him in some of his other stuff, which I was rather surprised by, even if there isn't really enough to justify why his character's crying like crazy all the time. But I think there's a great story to be told, and if they ever remake this, I hope they just commit to that story.
Yeah.
This is a case of I wouldn't mind if they tried another swing at this.
Almost 30 years,
Is
Paul.
it? It's almost 30 years. I mean, I think they could actually take some of the lessons from Battlestar Galactica from more recent space combat games and narratives and actually come up with something interesting and engaging.
Mm-hmm.
All right, dislikes. It's time, Natania. You get one beautiful dislike. So what is your dislike going to be?
Oh, I mean,
Target-rich environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me overall, there are just some really weird aesthetic decisions. The ones that just to me drive me crazy is the pilot beanies. Whatever, I don't know what else to call them, and I get that they're part of the whole thing, but they look so weird and also so late 90s. Like it does look like the backwards sort of little page boy hats that a lot of the guys wore at that time. And I think it's almost like they went to like the local kids like just regular clothing store to try to like boost in their wardrobe. And that kind of fell apart. I think some of the better costumes were the more lived in ones, right? But when they were trying to sort of like storytell through costume and make things look both young for the young upstart pilots and also still in the current aesthetic, it just really falls flat because it almost doesn't match some of the sets and some of the environments. Like I said, the necklines I'm looking at a still right now, and you can see it's like this low neckline here that sort of exposes the men's collarbones, which I have no like problem with. Like, sure, we can go for it, but it just seems really impractical and kind of just odd to make the connection again with Battlestar Galactica. Like they also clearly didn't have a huge budget to begin with. It got much better. But they were able to do things with tank tops that were just like layered tank tops backwards that created this unique thing that like you're like, oh, that's the new Battlestar Galactica. That looks like this and it's consistent. It's part of like what everyone wears. The like Mason, it looks like between the like a fez and a backwards page boy hat thing.
But, those things, yes.
Yeah, if it's not that, then it's just the runner-up is just the performances. I mean, like you just can't save this film from itself. Like you cannot coax. It's like when George Lucas is behind the camera. Like you can get Natalie Portman who is arguably one of the best actors of her generation to sound like she's literally reading off of cue cards with absolutely no conviction.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons, same reason why Phantom Menace was so bad, and I think the performances in that whole prequels were demonstrably bad because they were not directed well, and they were also, I think what this had going for it, this is the last thing I'll say, because is more of the practical set building. I think the biggest problem that was with Phantom Menace was they were doing everything CG. So actors themselves were humans. Like we respond to environments, but when you're working in this like white walled nothingness all the time, it's really disturbing and very hard to act. And I think people learn that skill. And now we have people that are used to being in those sort of like holodecks basically now for movies. But that was one of the first times that they really went to this level. I do like the fact that it feels more lived in a film like this. And again, Battlestar Galactica does the same thing. So yeah, I know it's a minor gripe, but it's like, it is to me representative of the whole, right? It's like a distracting detail that just feels so out of place that it throws me for a loop. But I know you'll all have plenty of more insightful thoughts.
Well,
but we brought you on because you're a maven of fashion and
I know, and I want to bring my own.
So yeah. So
I think a lot about these things. And when costumes in a film or a television series don't feel cohesive, to me, that is usually a sign that multiple people are trying to work overtime. The costume designers are the lowest paid, hardest working people in movie business. Like, no joke. And it's not usually lack of talent. It's usually lack of management and people being worked to death to be able to do things. But then you see something like Dune, which the new Dune films, some of the most amazing costuming I've seen in my entire life. I could go on forever about Lady Jessica's wardrobe transformation from film to film and all of this stuff. Just absolutely incredible. But they also had an insane budget and brought on some of the best people. And clearly, though these films are very hard to make, people are willing to do the work. Here, the work was not done for a number of reasons, and you feel it. It really just plays into that sense. I think that we all have of that sort of void center.
I'm glad you bring that up because it's a thing that we don't do in torture cinema really all that often. We're just like kind of like we're making fun of the movies and talking about like making jokes and like ripping into them a little bit. But it's also worth like pointing out as you're doing like almost at every level of making this film, there are probably people here who thought they were doing one thing and then were in another thing, or they didn't have the budget, or they were told to do something in 5 seconds. There's a great like accent coach / linguist named Eric Singer who's done a bunch of like Wired interviews, and he talks a lot about how like, you know, people will be really critical of these performances, but remember that you don't know how long an actor had to figure out how to do this accent or this voice. And so we have to like give them a little bit of leeway here. They probably had like a couple of weeks working with a vocal coach to try to do an accent that's completely different than theirs. And that's really difficult to do. It's really hard. And if you're like showing up on set and the character you thought you were playing is not the character you ended up playing because they rewrote the whole damn thing, well, now all the work you might have done is gone. You know, so like whatever Matthew Lillard thought he was playing, maybe that wasn't even the character he was playing, or Freddie Prinze Jr., you know, or the costumers, as you're pointing out. So yeah, this film maybe it doesn't work, right? I think we're all in agreement. It's not a good film, but it's not because like the people behind it all suck. You know, it's because everything together didn't work. And there are probably other factors that were beyond the people on screen or whose work is on screen that could have covered. So I'm trying to be nice to all you Hollywood people. We don't hate you.
No, it's true. I mean, that's just like in the publishing industry, right? It's like a handful of people make a huge amount of money, and like if the movie makes or breaks, it's not a big deal. I was just reading a very relevant skeet about Boris Johnson's not published the book that his publisher, I forget who it was, paid $2 million for. They're not going to publish the book. It doesn't matter. He's still getting that advance, right? So who ends up really paying for that? Because he's never going to earn that out, right? It's all these smaller authors who will end up getting, and advances get smaller and smaller. It's the same way in Hollywood, right? People make less and less. They have to unionize more. There's more pushback. We saw it with the writer's strike and the
use of AI.
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar industries, and it's very volatile, and most of the really hardworking people are not making a living wage. I mean, the fact that SAG, I think you have to make like $21,000 a year to get, you know, that's like such a low bar, but it's so hard to get to that point for most actors who are doing commercial work and voice work and like smaller bit parts, mostly not bringing in $10 million, $30 million paychecks. So. But again, it's capitalism. So not to get up on that high horse, but part of the reason is that it's built to quote unquote, give the people who are putting the most risk into it, who are people who have the money, to make the most benefit versus all the other people there, right? We treat these things like it's a lottery instead of an art form. And that...
I'd be more excited with that if when we're doing these torture cinema things, or when people are writing negative reviews of a movie, like there was a section that was like, what did you think about the person that signed off on this movie? You know, because like the actor, you know, an actor puts in a performance that maybe they took all the bad takes, or they just didn't know how to prep them or whatever. And then, you know, we may say performances are bad. We don't tend to do a lot of that, but like, you know, so they get just reamed on Rotten Tomatoes for a bad performance, you know? And it's like, well, but, you know, maybe that there's the people at the top, like they like greenlit this damn movie. Like they're not getting, like they see the negative reviews, but the reviews are following the actor or the director. It's not following the guy who I mean, maybe in the Hollywood universe it does, but not in the public. We're not talking about like the people who have all the money, you know, whoever they are, the secret
executive producer number 2,
secret executive,
$30 million. Yeah, exactly. We're not following them and them greenlighting stuff and making executive decisions that change the movie. And
we got very serious today.
We got serious today, so I'm going to go with my dislike now, which I watched this movie on a day that other bad things have happened, so I have an unnatural hatred for this movie, and so my dislike has to do with the gender sexual politics of this movie.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a heterosexual white man, but I'm going to go with this anyway. So, and it started off with a small thing, but it kind of blossomed into like, this is really screwed up. So let's take Saffron Burrows as our female lead, as our Lieutenant Commander Jeanette Angel Devereaux. So she's a woman commander of the Wing Commander Squadrons. Fine, that's good. Hey, we have female pilots in our 27th century. Great. So what do we have here? We have her sleeping with a subordinate.
Yep.
I mean Matthew Illard and who plays the one he's boning. Ginny Holder. Lieutenant Forbes. That's fine. I mean, they're peers. Fine. Let them bone. But I mean, it is fucked up in this people's navy that a superior officer thinks it's okay to go flirting around and eventually wind up in a relationship with someone under your command, and they doesn't shut this down immediately as this being very bad.
Yeah.
But it gets worse. So, I mean, and her character is portrayed, I mean, what is her character? Constipated, unfriendly, and wants to ignore that people who died on the ship never existed. But that's bad enough, but then came the word she uses several times that really annoyed me. Now, in war movies where it's all men, you sometimes get this genderization of officers saying, "Hey, ladies, you have to get in the line."
Right.
She does that.
I know.
To the pilots. Where A, she's a woman, and B, she has women pilots. It annoyed the fuck out of me. It's like, what the fuck is this? You have female pilots. So what is this? What is this gendered language you are using? And what the fuck is it supposed to mean? Pardon my language. This is fucked up. It really, every time it came up, and she does it several times. It was like, bam! It's like, very, very weird. No. You should be. I mean, I could accept it and not like it if it was an all-men's Navy, because, that's the stereotype, tradition, movie presentation, real life bit, fine. But to have women in your Navy and for you to denigrate your pilots by calling them ladies, it's offensive.
Yeah.
You're being offensive to yourself and to pilots like Lieutenant Forbes. Like, what is she supposed to take from that? So it's like it ranged me. Well,
I don't know if you remember the last time you dropped an F-bomb on this show.
It's been a while.
Was it
what was
Black
the last
Hole
time
when you said it? No, it wasn't Black Hole. It was some other movie.
No.
Oh no, it was.
I feel so important right now. I feel like it's just amazing.
You're in a historical moment because Paul almost never says, and he might say like shitty or something, but he almost never drops F-bombs. And I think the last time was probably like when we did the core, maybe.
No. I think it was Mazes and Monsters.
Oh, it was Mazes and Monsters because that really like.
Holy wow! Yeah. I read that book too. Oh my god!
That movie enraged me with a billion sons of hatred.
Yeah, and Trifidi Mats in chat raises a thing that I think Paul or Natania, you could either one, someone could respond to, which is like they state several times that female pilots are superior to male pilots.
Yeah,
telling the pilots to be better when they call them ladies.
No,
yeah, I don't think.
No.
What this reeks of to me, I mean, like, and if you look at the production, there weren't women producing this film. There weren't women writing this film. There weren't women consulted on this film. You can't use a tried and true trope language like that without knowing that your audience is going to read it one way. And I think this is such a case of like, we thought we could just literally replace this character and make them female or female presenting without any consideration for, I mean, that's the hard thing about genre, right? Like we want to create these worlds that are not connected to ours in some ways, right? We want to have that escapism, but unfortunately we live here. There are understandings. A lot of people are watching these films without the kind of depth that we have here on this call, right? For better or for worse. And so you have to understand that that is still a product of its time. And I think that that's a massive, I think that film would have been so much better if because there are plenty of unlikable female characters in sci-fi. We have Ripley, for God's sake. Like, come on. Like, how amazing, Sigourney Weaver to this day is like the best part about this character is that she was written as a character first. And the fact that she was a woman was just, that's a good way to do it. I think they were trying something like this here, but instead they actually just wrote her like a man and then forgot that they had said that female pilots were better. And then when
she herself is a woman, yes, so it's again bad world building and writing and scripting,
right? Yeah,
made manifest on the screen, and it just got really under my skin.
I like Saffron Burrows, and I mean, aside from again her '90s haircut, she's a bisexual icon. I mean, she was like,
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, queer woman before that was even a big thing. Like, also dated Alan Cummings, and like, I mean, really fascinating career, really interesting person. Like, very, very active politically. But I think unfortunately, just underutilized. Like probably one of the better actors in the entire thing. But again, you could get Meryl Streep in this movie, and it still would have felt absolutely bonkers, and she probably would have felt like she was again reading off the cue cards. So yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's we also fall into the like one is a sex object and one is sort of that, but also this like powerful person that is also not consistent, right? What you're really complaining about too, Paul, is the fact that the characterization is not consistent, right? Something's not falling through, just the same way with Freddie Prinze Jr.'s character. This whole identity as a pilgrim doesn't actually stick the landing. Pun intended.
Pun intended.
I mean, her introduction to her character is she's looks like she's an engineer who's just repairing a ship, and so Freddie Prinze like completely misses that she's actually the commander of this fleet of this air group, and that would be fine.
And there's class fucked up, pardon my language, things about that too. It's like so these are the people that make your ships fly, and you're going to treat them poorly. Really great there, Lieutenant Blair. You are real smart.
That would be stereotyping indeed, which Battlestar Galactica deals with, and tons of things deal with, where the pilots are like looking down at the engineering crew, and then usually there's some like lesson in film where it's like, oh, like after all, like we're on the same side, and I needed you because you put the bullets inside my ship, and I don't know how to do that. But like she's presented to us as, frankly, she's like positioned as being quite masculine in this moment, both in how she speaks, but also in how she physically carries herself. And I think they want this character that like exists on this spectrum because, out on the field, she is stern, stiff, kind of character. But there are all these like moments where like Freddie Prinze jumps into her room while she's like laying in bed.
Yep.
Which is
her pajama scenes with her like little spaghetti strap 1997 tank top situation. Yeah.
And it's
with the weird knee pads.
Strange. Super strange.
It is very strange. It's like, I mean, the pendulum of progress, right? I could see where they thought they were doing this right. It was like they kind of heard that this is how you could do it, but then they still got in their own ways and tripped over their own feet. And we're like, but she's the sexiest lady in the movie, so we have to have these. She can't just be and that's fine. You can have someone be multifaceted. And I'm even okay with the fact that she's sleeping with a subordinate. Like that's a good problem to play with, right? This is a good, like, I like flawed characters. I like people making bad decisions. I make bad decisions every day. Like, it's relatable. But when there aren't really the consequences for it, and it doesn't really build the character or like give you insight into the world at all, it just feels arbitrary, and arbitrary decisions just feel lazy and they feel sloppy. And that's, again, the structure, the whole, it's like everything's made of balsa wood, right? You just like jostle it a little bit and just, it's all going to fall down.
Yeah, I mean, this movie almost passes the Bechdel test because we do have the lieutenant commander and the lieutenant talk, but they mainly talk about men, so that doesn't really count. They have this nice heart-to-heart, but it's mostly about men. It's like, you almost did it.
Almost.
Yep.
It's like, as you said, I wonder how many women actually were in the production or writing of this film.
I couldn't find much. It's all. Although I will say, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just like when you say like I couldn't find much. It's like, oh, you like really went to look to see.
I did. I mean, I'm fascinated with. I mean, movies are one place where women have just like the lack of representation and the lack of it's one of those places where a woman can have one movie not be as huge as people expected and it's a massive failure, but men are able to make movie after movie after movie after movie that is demonstrably terrible, and never have to come across that. Like we saw that with Greta Gerwig. We've seen it with all kinds of stuff when then when it is successful, it's such a big deal. But I do think what's interesting though is that Terry Arbogast, who's the cinematographer, has done amazing stuff, including The Fifth Element. And I was wondering when I was looking at some of the stuff here, if because I did see some things that almost kind of reminded me a little bit of that. So I wonder, I just noticed this now, but kind of interesting that was something that he's done as well.
Interesting.
Well,
as well as The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc.
Yeah, because there is some visual similarities here. Like I've mentioned in our chat when we were watching it live that the like fighter planes that they fly look very much like the like alien troll planes that are in Fifth Element. There's some very similarities to the way they're presented.
But you know what other film he did as well? Another one that I bet we could watch here is Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
Oh God! That movie made me rage.
I don't like
it. So we have Fifth Element on one side, and then we have
Valerian on the other. That movie is definitely torturous cinema territory for me. Definitely torture.
Definitely.
But yeah, the box office was 11.6 million, and the budget was about 27 million. So,
see, Shaun, we should get guests like Natania on more often because Natania does her research.
Well, I'm a massive nerd, and I
mean, a lot of people just come on and they watch the show and watch the movie and talk about it. You bring the stuff to the fire. Yeah, you bring it to the fire.
Well, but I mean, I'm chronically curious, and I also love context, right? I think context is so important, and part of that is being a fashion historian, and part of that's being a medievalist. Yeah, context is really. When I was in graduate school, when I was studying the Middle Ages and medieval literature, you have to like pick a theory to like be your theory approach, right? Feminist theory, Marxist theory. I went with New Historicism. What I loved about New Historicism was that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to read the stories in context of their time and then extrapolate things. So you're not just. I was always frustrated with people kind of a postmodern reading of the Canterbury Tales. I'm like, okay, but I also want to know, like, in that time, a character like the Wife of Bath, what was the world like that she was living in? How accurate was she as a character? And it turns out women were brewers all over the place. Women had jobs in the same time period that we so much is lost in translation, but it's so cool to be able to look at like actual, because like the British are bad at a lot of things, but they're really good at record keeping. So you could find how many times women had taken their husbands to court for physical abuse. And the Wife of Bath talks all about that. Like abusing women is a huge part of her platform, which feels so modern, but you're like, no, nobody likes that. Like, this is not like people like, oh, men did men did shitty things, but women also fought back. We didn't just like wake up and become feminists one day. So I mean, that's the thing about context that's so important. And we also believe our own myths, right? We tell ourselves how things have been and everyone just goes, oh, that's totally how it is. But, even with a crap movie like this, which is, again, ostensibly not a good film, it's really interesting to look at it in the context of the time that it came out and to have been a young person and the target audience for this, because this was peak Star Wars, Natania. This was like before Phantom Menace came out. I got all the books, I got the magazines, I got the novelizations. I mean, I was ready to go. And then I was betrayed. And I walked out of that movie theater and my childhood had been stomped upon and it was so terrible. But This should have been everywhere for me. And I think that they probably had no marketing budget. I think they knew. Sometimes you can tell that they know they have a bomb on their hands. But what is the other big one that came out at the same time?
Big movie from 1999.
The big sci-fi movie that came out in the same. That's actually pretty good. It's military sci-fi.
Oh, Starship Troopers.
Yeah, Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Which I did see, and I thought that was. I mean, what year was that? Was that a little bit? That was like
97.
97?
Yeah, something like that, or 97 or 8.
I'm curious though. Yeah, 97. I'm curious if it was it a box office failure though?
I
sure.
seem to recall it's spawned like 8,000 different sequels. It certainly didn't make anyone any money. Its budget,
no,
but
it wasn't a complete bomb. However, yeah,
it actually made money. So
it made some money.
$110 million budget, which was much bigger than what we just have been talking about.
It made like 120 million.
120 million, yeah.
So it kind of did its thing.
But also, I mean, they kind of did a similar thing with a lot of the actors, but they were not quite as it, right? No, Neil Patrick Harris is not like an it guy.
Hey, you be careful right now.
Now he might be in it. He wasn't it then. Then he was Doogie Howser.
Yeah, Denise Richards though was definitely an it girl. So
she was. Yeah.
I wonder if they were trying to go with some of that too. Like if that was part of the influence of like maybe we can just ride on the coattails of it. Because there are a lot of similarities. But
yeah, there are a little bit. It just I think Starship Trooper keeps its tone consistent.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's like it's one of those movies you're watching. You're like, this is better than it should be.
Oh, Starship Troopers.
Yeah, Paul Verhoeven knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And keeps to the bit.
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw Neil Patrick Harris come out in the SS uniform, it's like, oh yeah, you're making it clear for anybody who didn't figure it out by now. Well done, Paul. I figured it out, but it's like
not
now
subtle,
it's
but, you know.
No, not at all. I mean, yeah.
But I remember that coming out, and I would have been only 16, but I really don't remember Wing Commander at all. And in addition to being a Star Wars nerd, I was also a massive movie buff. Like I had Premiere magazine, and I had, what was the other one? I mean, I subscribed to all of them, so I would like. I'm just surprised that it was just like not on my radar.
I think it just sank without a trace.
Yeah,
it's a film people wish that didn't exist. Is I think where like Starship Troopers maybe wasn't a blockbuster blowout, but it has had a much more positive impact on our culture.
Afterlife. Yes,
it's Afterlife. Like it's well regarded. Setting aside the 8,000 sequels that they've now done,
right?
You know, so I think there is,
and you can see where that influenced Battlestar Galactica. I mean, there's definitely a DNA thing that falls through. I think that with this movie, though, it just skips it. It's like a recessive gene that just gets bred out.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the Pilgrim gene.
The Pilgrim gene did not.
This is how they get to us. As we told in the movie, right? That the Pilgrims used to like infiltrate to sabotage and like so this is like, them sabotaging our timeline because they can now go through time or something. I don't know.
Sean, we have not talked about your dislike yet.
Oh no, we have not. Are you guys ready?
Yes. I'm ready, Sean.
I hate that this film pretends that it doesn't happen in space because no part of this film does anything make sense from its relationship to where it actually is. I mentioned at the very beginning that this obviously feels a lot like Das Boot and a lot of other films that are kind of in that ilk. And that's because it's very clear that from a logic perspective, they have treated space throughout this movie as though it is on a planet with an atmosphere where things like up and down mean something. And here, characters
these are minor details.
Come on. It's not my. No.
I'm kidding.
No.
Sorry, the sarcasm was not laid on.
Yeah, to dial it up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I see in chat Trivets mentioning like sound in space, and I do want to know that's the least annoying thing about how they treat space because I'm just willing to just let it go for effect. It's more that on the one hand, they do a great thing that I love, which is they make the ship's interiors feel like submarines, which makes a lot of sense. They probably
Much
would
more
be
sense.
cramped, very militaristic, very submarine-like. You'd feel like you're in a pressurized tube. But from the outside, all the ships move like they're submarines. They hide like they're submarines. They interact with the outside world like they're submarines. They shoot torpedoes like submarines. Nobody seems to go, think about the different axes that you can move. So when they move, they always, just go, left and right relative to their position in space.
Right.
Without realizing that you can move all kinds of different directions, like the game that would come not terribly long after this, Homeworld, which would recognize that you have axes X, Y, and Z, and you could go all these different directions. And I think the problem is that there's only so much of that I can take before I start getting really annoyed, because you start to go from we're just going to treat this way to all of our tactics are also going to follow as though we are on an atmosphere or in an atmosphere. And once you do that, my sense of disbelief disappears. I can't anymore. If you're talking about flying planes in space, none of the thrusters don't work that way. G-forces don't work the same way. The way you might move your ship, you wouldn't engage in combat the same way because you can't. So ships, they're little ships going like it's hitting atmosphere in space. I'm but that's not. I'm not saying Battlestar Galactica a few years later totally gets the physics right, but they at least kind of acknowledged this is you could flip the ship and then go another different direction. You could do all these different things. This film constantly just wants to be a World War II movie. And
it's the DNA of the games at the time were all like this. There were a number of space simulation shooters in the Wing Commander series, and they all act like this. It's not till the early 2000s where we get a game like Independence War. Did you ever play Independence War, Shaun?
Yes, I did.
Where you actually have momentum and ships you actually have to deal with the physics of ship velocity. So otherwise, until that point, it was ships and fighters act like planes and planes, battleships, and carriers. I mean, we get a broadside for crying out loud in this movie. It's it looks cool, but it makes absolutely no bleeping sense.
They're not ships of the line, you bastard.
No, they're not ships of the line. That's not how it works.
Why would you do this? Why would you do this? Just turn the ship in space and then shoot and run away.
We even see them loading up the torpedoes as if they were in a submarine or on a battleship. It's
the thing that drove me nuts. So all of these planes and missiles and things are coming for their ship, right? And you would think, well, they mentioned flak earlier in the thing, right? Oh, there's the flak, a damages so-and-so's ship and blah, blah, whatever, right? And I'm sitting here going, oh, great, so they must have some form of space flak guns, right? No, it turns out they just meant debris or whatever, right? But I'm sitting here going, why don't these ships have a way to shoot all the different directions to protect the ship from any incoming stuff? Why are we just sitting there accepting
We didn't get the software
shot?
Update yet. It was just...
It wasn't in the software update. It's because they treat them like submarines. They think of them as submarines as though they are in water where you couldn't have a flak gun inside the water. It wouldn't work. Well, you can't do that. I'm sorry. You just can't for me. I lose it. I can't do it.
Yeah, well, and I think, that goes back to what we were saying before, something like that, which is pretty grievous for you. I think, maybe not everybody would be that upset about it, but with the rest of the movie also has not created the trust in you, and you don't really like the characters very much either, because half of them are unlikable failures or just overly horny and look like they're supposed to be dancing in an NSYNC video. Those things just feel like further betrayal of your time, right? And that's, we talk about this a lot in the modern age. I work in marketing in my day job. Time is the most precious thing that anybody has. And yeah, the average person still watches a heck of a lot of TV, but my tolerance anymore for things, when someone's like, oh, wait till season 3, it gets really good. I'm like, no, thank you. I'm 43 years old. I am firmly in midlife. I don't have time. If it doesn't get good for 3 seasons, unless Tom Hiddleston is in it, I am not going to be watching it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right though, because you mentioned earlier like Fifth Element, which is a film like in space, like the physics really don't matter because it's silly and playful, but like we're so enraptured by all the fun characters and quirky world building and all of that we just don't care. It doesn't matter. It's not important to the story. But I think because this film is trying to be a war film and is trying to make us think that all these characters are engaged in tactics. There's little debates they're having about what tactic to use. You know, there's a point at which, like, if you didn't want me to think about how any of this works, you should you should have made sure I was distracted enough to not notice. And you,
I mean, this is something we talk a lot about on World Building for Masochists, which is like sometimes it just needs to pass a vibes test.
Yeah.
Right? Like it doesn't have to be that you have a codex at the back of the book and an index and like you've literally built all the recipes out for the food. If the vibes are there, you can get away with so much. The problem is if that's not even consistent,
you're dead.
That's where
in the water.
You're making them think about things you don't want
you
them
can't
to think
turn.
about.
Because again, that's like
yeah, that's a mistake. Well, I think it's time for us to get to our final thoughts and to grade this movie. Using the American letter grade system, the lowest grade you can give is an F-, and the best you can give is an A+. No film on Torture Cinema has received an A+ to date. Although, to be fair,
not going to happen tonight.
That's kind of, expected. So, Natania, your final thought and your grade.
I'm going to go with a D-.
Oh, boy.
My final thought being the only reason it's not an F is because, again, I feel for the people that were behind this film. I give them points for trying. And I want to see more. I want to see more cool sci-fi movies. I feel like we're in a golden age of like TV right now, but I would also love some non-Star Wars big movies, Dune level stuff that really continues to push the envelope.
Scratch that itch. Yeah.
Oh, what about you?
This movie got me to make an F-bomb on Torture Cinema, so that's a bad sign.
Twice.
What's that?
Twice
at least.
Twice, yes.
Five
yes, so that's a very bad sign. I think I need to be a little more objective because I watched this movie when I had a very bad day at work, and that kind of, I'm trying to be more objective. It's kind of hard for me to be objective about this movie. I mean, lots of people worked hard in this movie. There are a few actors, as I said in my that try, but this movie really, really rubbed me the wrong way, as much as I'm going to be unfair to this movie. I normally am nice and fair. I'm going to be unfair and give it a damning F+.
Wow.
Oof.
Yeah, I'm sorry, listeners. Yes, Unleashed Paul. I mean, probably in an objective role, like give it a D- like Natania, but I am not in the mood to be kind.
That's totally fine.
This movie.
Right. So,
Shaun,
my final thought. I'll just have a final thought, which is a thing we didn't mention, and I'll just mention it to like throw a hand grenade into the room, which is the Kilrathi are meant to be like space tigers, and they are in no.
Oh my god!
Tigers,
Oh my god! I was like, they look like reptilian, reptilian things.
We don't have time for you. No.
No! It's like I played those Wing Commander games.
Time for you. Oh man, you need that on a mug, Paul.
I don't have time for you. Yes, oh my god. Yes.
Yeah, it's a fail.
we don't see them often, and they look like reptilian hybrids. It's like these
when
are not the
practical effects
Kilrathi.
go wrong, in the age of the post-Henson age, there's no excuse.
I mean, this is the same year as Galaxy Quest, which has animatronic aliens.
Amazing.
Oh, yes.
Amazing. Yeah.
There we go.
So,
and Farscape started around the same time, right?
Farscape was 99, yes.
And Farscape had far superior stuff as well. So, anyhow.
I don't know. They were
Dargo looks better than any Kilrathi.
Yeah.
Period.
So, I don't really like this film. I can understand why Freddie Prinze Jr. does not like this film either. It's not very good. And there are things about it that I don't think I could rewatch this. So,
no.
I will also give it a D-. It is, as Trish says in chat, not the worst thing we have ever watched. It certainly could have been worse. It could have been grossly racist and horrifically sexist,
Yeah.
which we have had in a film before.
Yeah.
This not really. Although it weirdly kind of ethnocentric / is it racist against the Pilgrims? I don't. Are they a race? What are they? I don't know.
Well,
the world may never know.
yeah. I mean, I guess if it is intended to be that way, it could be sort of a weird ethno-cleansing situation, but we'll never know.
It's very strange.
We'll die wondering.
Yeah. Well.
So we average out to just under a D-.
Yeah.
I pull it off a D-. Yeah. So you two kind of cancel me out. That's fine.
That's okay. Well, we're ending the show, but before we do, Natania, do you want to let folks know where they can find you and your work, and if you've got anything in particular you want to make sure people know about?
I do. I've had a really busy year. So I have a website, NataniaBarron.com, which should be more updated than it is, but it's usually the big stuff is going to be there anyway. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads. I'm on TikTok. Usually it's @Natania or @Natania Barron. On TikTok, it is @Natania Books. I am also part of the World Building for Masochists podcast family, and we have a podcast every other week about world building with my amazing co-anchors, co-hosts, Marshall, Ryan Maresca, and Cass Morris. And I've had a very busy year for books. I've had 3 books come out this year. So we re-released Queen of None that came out in May. Netherford Hall, which is the first in a Sapphic Pride and Prejudice retelling with witches series called Love in Netherford, came out in August. And then the second book in my Queen of Fates series, the second book, Queen of Fury, is coming out this December. So I'm currently in the fun review time where I'm trying to not look and then also look at what people are saying. But it's particularly exciting for me because I've had kind of bad luck with series and second books, but it sounds like people are enjoying this one a lot. And it's a bit of a retelling of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and Dame Ragnall and the marriage of Sir Gawain and Dame Ragnall, which actually takes me back to the Canterbury Tales. Fun fact, the only Arthurian story is told by the wife of Bath.
I did not remember that.
Yes,
nice.
Yes. And so that's one of the stories that I actually is part of that story. So, but yes, and a character that I sort of kind of invented as one of the main characters as well as Sir Gawain, and it's a romantasy, so it's very bit spicy, but it's also, if you love Arthuriana, it's full of Easter eggs for you as well. So
Natania knows her Arthuriana, folks. Trust me.
I do have a degree that I mostly studied Arthurian romance. So at least I put that to good use occasionally. But yes, it is a very fun place to write in. And so those are all coming out from Solaris Books. You can find them pretty much anywhere fine books are sold. And some not fine places where fine books are sold, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Now I want to pick your brain sometime about the Green Knight movie.
Oh, I love the Green Knight movie so much. It is one of my favorite films of all time. So
ooh, okay.
Happy to. It's also a Christmas movie, and I'm so excited that my book is coming out right before Christmas because Sir Gawain and the Green Knight takes place on Christmas.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm like and the book is all in the winter, so it has all the vibes. So very, very excited here for my little nerdity corner of the world.
Well, thank you very much for being with us tonight. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. I'm with my people, so it was great.
Awesome. So for folks at home, you can follow us, send questions, let us know what you think, all that stuff. We have our listener suggestion form, which is skiffyfanty.com/listener suggestions, or you can email skiffyfanty@gmail.com. If this movie hurt you, you could let us know an email if you'd like. We are obviously on all the social places as Skiffy and Fanty. You can find all of those links in our link tree, linktr.ee/skiffyandfanty. We're on Blue Sky, Mastodon, Facebook, I don't know, like 1,000 different places, I forget. So find us lots of places, get our newsletter, all that good stuff. Here, Skiffy and Fanty is on Alphabet Streams on Twitch usually every Friday at 7 p.m. Central, excepting rare incidences when that isn't the case. And then I'm at ShaunDuke.net, and I have a link tree as well, which is just /Shaun Duke, and I'm at most of the same platforms that Skiffy is because I have to post on both accounts anyway. So
You didn't even mention your history, Shaun.
Oh, I do, yeah. ShaunDuke.net, the history is where I tell totally true stories about real people that are absolutely
like
100% the truth, including Paul, who may or may not be an immortal.
An immortal Roman emperor.
Yeah. Look at a bust, Natania, later. Get a picture of Paul and look at a bust of Emperor Trajan and convince me that they're not the same person.
Natania doesn't even have to be a bust of the picture of me. She's met me several times.
Okay, just
it's
look at a bust
on several continents, even. So
this is true. I think I've seen you in more countries than almost anyone, actually.
You're up to like three.
I mean, which is a lot for
which is more than most people.
Scotland, Finland, and the U.S.
And in the U.S., yes.
Paul, I've got Natania beat on this. Then I have seen you in London, Helsinki, and Vietnam, and the United States.
Ooh.
Oh my God! You are the current.
So I just need to get you to Switzerland. That's the next one.
That would bring you up to it.
Just so you know, Paul does fit into carry-on luggage.
Not with his Hugos though. They just take up.
Or my camera.
Paul, what about you? Where can folks find you?
You can find me rocketing across the internet with 2 Hugo rockets as Prince Justin. I do book reviews. I do podcasting. I do streaming. I share photography. I show up on other people's things. I am ubiquitous on the internet.
It's true. Just slamming doors. Oh my goodness.
John,
I'm just
you
gonna
okay?
assume somebody that was a ghost that was making.
Well, is our awkward ending your ghost?
Yeah, well, because it's the
very
ghost.
seasonally appropriate because
that is true.
Halloween is just around the corner.
That is true. So you know what, Paul? I'm gonna assume that was the ghost of your future self when finally you decide to no longer be immortal, but you become a time traveling ghost who haunts people.
Ooh.
If I'm unstuck in time, like a certain character on the show I'm not going to spoil, that would be really weird and interesting. I don't want to spoil because that just happened on the show. So anyway, I am not unstuck in time, listeners.
No, you aren't. But on that note,
that's what they would say, though.
That's true. Yeah, so that's how we know. Yeah, we got you now. Yeah, get our little, what do they call that Ghostbusters little machine where you throw it underneath them and it opens? That thing.
Oh.
Coming for you, Paul. And on that note, awkward ending and scene.
The spice must flow.